Hey everyone, it's the year's 1999 coming back at you in another video. Today we are discussing how the use of battle maps and handouts can greatly add to your D&D campaign. Even if you are mostly a theater of the mind DM, using just a few items here and there can greatly help your players to immerse themselves in the game world. To be honest, when I first started, I really didn't use battle maps and had very few, if any, handouts. Actually, the first handout I remember using was at the beginning of my Enter the Dungeon campaign. The party was doing a quest for a magic university, and the Tempest cleric Javin was the de facto leader of the group, and the school trusted him the most. And they magically sent him a letter advising him to keep an eye on the other two, and to keep the air of mystery rather than just reading it aloud, like I normally would have done with a letter. I just typed it up in a document and direct messaged it to the player. It really can be as simple as that to add a layer of interaction to the campaign. And if you're going to have the players find written messages, perhaps instead of just reading them from your notes, you just let them read it themselves. Later on, I realized the utility of cards for magic items. I love making my own magic items, and even have a video on making magic weapons more interesting. If you want, when the players find a magic item, you can of course just describe its powers from your notes. That works great, especially if it's a famous item like, say, the Bag of Holding. But if it's a more special item, use those notes to make an item card. If you have an image you can include, that's all the better. And here's a couple examples from my own campaigns. The first up is the Frying Pan of Plusone, or +1. It's a +1 frying pan. Actually, I'm just going to play the recording, because I don't think I can do this story justice by just retelling it myself.
On the source of the basement. It's a cellar.
Can I have a frying pan?
Sure. You are now have +1 frying pan. It's not a +1 frying pan,
Ooh,
but you.
frying
Shoot,
pan.
a +1 frying pan?
Magic
Nice.
frying pan for people.
Nice.
That
That's some cast iron goodness.
Alright, if I were to use that as a weapon, how much would it do at a time?
50.
Probably like a club, so
Alright, I have a great club, so that's a D8.
well, no, it's probably not that strong. We'll say it's probably closer to a D4.
D4. Oh man, alright.
Hey, a +1's a +1.
Yeah,
No, I said it's not a plus.
He said it was a +1.
He said it was +1.
I said you.
And so then after that Earth Mover, he just kind of kept it in his inventory for a while, but he wanted a weapon that he could throw, and he realized, oh hey, I've got the frying pan. And when he finally used it as a weapon, I told him that he could have the +1 bonuses. And so now it's actually one of his favorite weapons to use. And you know what, if he were to ever actually make a cooking check with it, he could get some bonuses there as well. The second item is the Magician's Wand. It's a custom item that I gave to the halfling monk, Thitch, when he joined the party to help balance that Earth Mover had multiple magic items at that point. And side note, actually, I may have gone a bit overboard with magic loot early on, but the good news is that they seem to have forgotten about a lot of it. But anyway, the Magician's Wand started off just letting Thitch cast Prestidigitation, but after a quest to help a powerful group of druids, it also let him cast Druidcraft. Who knows, maybe after he does some work with some celestials, maybe he can learn Thaumaturgy. Now, if only there was a video that could give you all sorts of fun uses for the spells Thaumaturgy, Druidcraft, and Prestidigitation. Linked below. Lastly, we have the Ring of Seeing. This is a magic ring that a rogue found by carefully exploring a closet that turned everything inside of it invisible. And, gives you different powers like being able to see in the dark and find invisible creatures. And it's a Melius item, which is just my term for a magic item that can improve over time. Now, those are just some pretty straightforward examples of item cards. They can be a great way of letting players keep track of their resources. But some other handouts you might use could include a tavern menu, maybe a royal edict posted in the town square, or some notes that they find on how to construct their own powerful items. Next, let's talk about maps. I have three main types. First is the world maps. These are to let the players know how different cities and nations relate to each other. For example, here's the map of Galais. It's the main country that I use for most of my campaigns. I designed this a few years back and made sure that the country had plenty of fun attractions. For example, there's a deep canyon that has a dwarven town in it, a magic forest that has a Feywild in the middle, which is actually where they met that group of druids that helped them out, And the capital is surrounded by a mountain range, and there's even a top-of-the-world monastery a la High Hrothgar, which, by the way, in my notes I managed to spell High Hrothgar correctly the first time, which was a surprise for me. Next, there's a sort of local navigation map. An easy example of this is a sea chart. In my Enter the Dungeon campaign, they were using a ship to track down a water temple. I gave them a copy that they could mark their own path on, and I had a master copy with certain squares marked with events. Along the way, they found a giant shark, an island with only a few trees, and wound up in the middle of a pirate battle. Another way you could do this, though, is buried treasure. Maybe they need to figure out which square the treasure's buried in before anyone else can. Or maybe it's like digging for treasure in Pokemon, where you only get so many chances before a particular cave caves in on you. Last up is battle maps, or game boards, depending on how you want to look at it. Now, I won't lie, using these is going to add a lot of time to your prep work, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. For me, I really enjoy the process of making these game boards. It helps me to visualize ideas I have for different, arena shapes and field effects, and it gives you a great idea for the directional dynamics that should be at play in a battle. For example, how far can you shoot your bow? How many creatures would be in range of your fireball? With a pre-rendered battle map, you can actually tell. It doesn't just have to be an ad hoc estimation on the Dungeon Master's part. Now, it wouldn't make sense for me to just keep running through the practical benefits of battle maps using only theoretical terms. With that in mind, let's run through some examples. Now, I will disclose that I did not come up with the designs for most of these myself, but I did convert them to Google Drawings. I like to use Google Drawings for my battle maps because the Google Drive makes it super easy to make, store, organize, and share documents. And the more battle maps I make, the easier it is to make more because I can just keep copying from existing resources. Now, first up here is a ship. Now, I feel kind of bad that I can't really find the original source of this ship. Looks like this, by the way. I know I got it from r/5e naval campaigns, so if anyone can recognize the original image and know who the first artist was, please let me know down in the comments, because honestly it was just a great design. I'm really glad to have been able to use that as a resource. By the way, it occurred to me while I was editing that I could just do a reverse image search of the existing photo that I have, and that got me to the Twitter for an Archie short at Bidcode Stuff. So go ahead and drop him a like if you liked his design. I know I do. It's a great image of a pirate ship, and I'm really glad I found it. If you're watching this video, thank you for putting it out there. You rock, man. But I went ahead and converted it myself to Google Drawings, kind of in my own style, as you can see. And it was being controlled by a bunch of zombie pirates when the players first found it. And they need to get rid of the zombies in order to take the ship for themselves. Pretty much the way I did the zombies was I just took the bandit stat block from the monster manual and then gave them undead fortitude, the undead monster type, and the poison immunity. And this actually made for a really interesting fight where, they were struggling for a while to, pick these guys off one at a time, battling against them. But then eventually what they realized was that if they could get some of them close to the edge, then they could just knock them off into the water. Seriously, just knocking an enemy off a ledge down into water or a pit or whatever is a great maneuver whenever you can do it. And this over here, the big obvious arrow, this is just a running gag I use a lot of times whenever I'm sharing a Google drawing with my players for D&D. I just use it when I need to refer to something like, oh yeah, just look for the big obvious arrow. I'm pointing right at it. One time, to just continue with the joke, I needed like the bigger obviouser arrow to point to the big obvious arrow, and I think part of the gag was that the bigger obviouser arrow was even smaller. But okay, moving on. Now, before I was using, real battle maps for that campaign, I just sort of used this one as a general idea of a battle map. Basically, they were traveling through a magical mansion that they knew had a banshee inside of it, and when they finally cornered the banshee up in the attic, she had this room full of mirrors that she could, jump into one mirror and then use it to warp around, and after a while the players realized that, and eventually what the players realized they had to do was, in order to decrease where she could teleport to, they had to, start attacking the mirrors in order to break them, and after they'd broken a few, they were finally able to corner her and defeat her using their abilities. Next is a sort of camp area that 3 trolls were using. These trolls, had this giant bonfire, and the players used this to their advantage by, knocking the trolls around, and when they had the strength to, pushing them into the fire. And the way I kind of ruled it was that the fire did 1d10 fire damage for each block of fire that a creature was overlapping with. Now, I know that fire is famously good against trolls, but they roleplayed it well. In character, this wasn't about them, metagaming to get rid of the troll's regen ability. It was just, oh hey, here's a very useful weapon that we can use to defeat these giants that are trying to kill us. It made sense in character. They weren't just taking advantage of out-of-game knowledge, which is a good way to do that. Now, recently, that same group with the trolls, they were also exploring a house in the woods that was largely based on the woodland manse from the Essentials kit. First up there was a pumpkin garden filled with some aggressive boars. And these boars actually attacked the sorcerer jailed when he got too close to their pumpkins. But the twist was that some of these boars were actually shapeshifted orcs that in the middle of the battle actually showed their true forms and started using magic against them. Because it turns out this whole house was under control by this small orc clan that was dedicated to a god of thunder named Torde. And then after that, they rested up in the kitchen, started exploring the rest of the house. Actually, I had most of the house blacked out for a while, and then slowly revealed each room as they explored through it. This is just my master copy, so I can show you the full reference of it. And, in their exploration, they found that there was a troll brewing a potion, and this potion was actually letting him animate bushes. And the monk said she actually has kind of a running thing with him where he really doesn't like animated bushes because they ambushed him early on in the campaign. So that made for interesting mini battle before they finally just stopped to talk it through for a bit. And this guy, the troll that was brewing the potions, decided to lead them upstairs to the rest of his orc group. Then upstairs in the woodland manse, they found a small treasure room, a hallway full of sturges, and then an upper room where the other members of that orc religious group were meeting. And luckily, the players, they went for a negotiative route instead of just lying waste to all these orcs and taking what they want, which is actually something I really like about my players, that, they're not always super violent. They're willing to talk through their problems. And that's a good way to deal with problems when you have them. Sometimes punching is not the answer. Next is the Velkenvelv prison from my Out of the Abyss campaign. This main area, it's got a series of bridges that connect towers over a seemingly endless pit. And in the top right corner here, there was actually a Quogoth cage that they had to be careful around. And I'm really glad that I was able to introduce this map, because at first when I was just trying to describe the area to the players, I was having a really hard time expositing the dynamics of the cave system. But once, we had the map, it made things a lot more interesting, and they figured out that, hey, they could have a super easy time just by lining up the drows and knocking them into the pit. I'm telling you, if you have a ledge, use the shove action. It's a great way to make quick work of a fight. Then after that, they went to the Drow Priestess's chambers in order to fight her so that they could, find out what was going on in order to be able to escape from the prison. And so this made for, a really dynamic fight, because they had several other prisoners on their side. She had these spiders that she could summon, and, she had 2 drow workers. And overall, once again, I feel like the dynamics of the fight, they were much easier to articulate when we had this clear battle map showing how everyone related to each other, where the creatures are, what spiders she's summoning, and everything like that. And, these are really just a quick overview of some of the maps I've made. If you want to use any of them, they're all linked to below. Let me know how using them goes for you. And if you have any battle maps of your own, please share them. My goal with all my videos is just to make a shared collection of D&D resources that we can all use. Oh, would you look at that? All this, and I didn't even have time to really talk about the water temple. You know what? Let's call this the first part in a loosely connected series of videos. Next time, I will be telling the story about that Enter the Dungeon group exploring the mysterious temple and all the maps we used. If you'd rather just listen to the recordings of that show, they're published here on YouTube. Or how about another video talking about the most number of languages a player character can learn in D&D? I'll be back soon with another video, but until next time, I'm the Aries1999. Have a great day, and God bless.